afternoon again, everyone. I just needed to come back with this story about these twins brothers, Quadir and Nizer, that was found dead in Georgia mountains, Bell Mountains in Georgia, 90 minutes away from their home. I just came across a video by Crime Chronicles, and I am going to share this video with you all so we can continue to shine the light on what happened to Quadir and Nizer when they were last seen and went missing. And family reported them missing for a couple of days, and they never arrived to Boston. They never went through TA or anything. But some driver claimed dropped them off at the front door of, dropped them off at the airport or whatever, but they never arrived because they plane tickets and everything was still with them. So how did they end up on Bell Mountain? And this investigation is going quiet. So let's listen.
On March 7th, 2025, Kader and Nazir Lewis were supposed to catch a 7 a.m. flight to Boston. Their bags were packed, the tickets were in their wallets, and their family believed they were heading to visit friends for the weekend. But that flight left without them. The next morning, hikers made a chilling discovery at the top of Bell Mountain in Georgia. The twin brothers, just 19 years old, were found dead. Gunshot wounds. No witnesses. No clear explanation. Two brothers with bright futures, inseparable since birth. Their family described them as two halves of the same soul. They were best friends, practically identical, finishing each other's sentences, moving through life in sync. So how did they end up lifeless on a remote mountain 90 miles from home? A place they had no known connection to? It didn't make sense. Their trip to Boston had been carefully planned. They were excited about it. But now, instead of greeting their friends in Boston, their parents were facing two unthinkable losses. And the answers, if they exist at all, remain buried beneath layers of questions. Why Bell Mountain? How did they get there? And what really happened in those final hours before they were found? Authorities were quick to consider the possibility of a murder-suicide, but their family rejected that idea immediately. Kader and Nazir were close, too close for something like that. They would never hurt each other, their mother insisted. And yet, the evidence pointed to something more complicated. Autopsies were ordered. Investigators retraced their last steps. But the deeper they looked, the stranger the story became. Inconsistencies in the timeline, missing details, the lingering question of how they even got to Bell Mountain in the first place. This is the story of Kader and Nazir Lewis, two brothers whose lives were filled with promise, and whose deaths have left a void their family may never truly understand. What started as a simple trip to Boston turned into a mystery that has left their family desperate for answers, and haunted by the possibility that the truth may be more unsettling than anyone imagined. Kader and Nazir Lewis weren't supposed to be in Georgia. They had plans, solid, clear plans. On March 7th, 2025, they were booked on a 7 a.m. flight to Boston. It wasn't a last-minute trip. The tickets were bought in advance. Their bags were packed. They had told their family where they were going and why. They were heading to visit friends. It was supposed to be a quick trip, a weekend away. Their mother remembered seeing them that morning before they left. They seemed calm, focused. There was no hesitation, no sign that anything was wrong. At 5:30 a.m., a rideshare was ordered from their house to the airport. They left the house on time. No missed calls, no last-minute changes. The plan was in motion. Security footage confirmed that they never made it through TSA. In fact, there's no evidence they even set foot in the terminal. The rideshare driver confirmed that he dropped them off at the entrance, but after that, they seemed to vanish. Phone records showed that both of their phones were turned off shortly after 6 a.m. They weren't answering texts. Calls went straight to voicemail. Their parents assumed they were just caught up in the rush of travel. But as the hours passed, that explanation started to unravel. The friends waiting for them in Boston never heard from them. When the plane landed and the twins weren't on it, their family's concern turned to panic. Messages were left. Calls were made. No response. Later that afternoon.
So you mean to tell me that they had took a ride, a share ride, either Uber ride or a Lyft ride to get to the airport because they didn't really like driving. They didn't drive to the airport. They called a ride. Six something in the morning. I mean, they flight left at. We got to go back. What time did they say the flight left? Let's go back.
But now, instead of greeting their friends in Boston, their parents were facing two unthinkable losses, and the answers, if they exist at all, remain buried beneath layers of questions. Why Bell Mountain? How did they get there? And what really happened in those final hours before they were found? Authorities were quick to consider the possibility of a murder-suicide, but their family rejected that idea immediately.
A murder suicide when there was no. How could it be a murder suicide and they both on the same mat and found laying in the same position? I don't understand how that was going to work with the family telling them it was a murder suicide. But I'm trying to get to the part to hear about this ride they took supposedly to the airport. Don't you think that sound kind of suspicious? Like they just went with that and they would have, and the ride was supposed to have picked them up. So do we think that the ride that came to get them was the person who took them up there to the Bell Mountain and then lied and said he did drop them off at the airport? That's what I'm trying to say. Let's go on.
Kader and Nazir were close, too close for something like that. They would never hurt each other, their mother insisted. And yet, the evidence pointed to something more complicated. Autopsies were ordered. Investigators retraced their last steps. But the deeper they looked, the stranger the story became. Inconsistencies in the timeline, missing details, the lingering question of how they even got to Bell Mountain in the first place. This is the story of Kader and Nazir Lewis, two brothers whose lives were filled with promise, and whose deaths have left a void their family may never truly understand. What started as a simple trip to Boston turned into a mystery that has left their family desperate for answers, and haunted by the possibility that the truth may be more unsettling than anyone imagined. Kader and Nazir Lewis weren't supposed to be in Georgia. They had plans, solid, clear plans. On March 7th, 2025, they were booked on a 7 a.m. flight to Boston. It wasn't a last-minute trip. The tickets were bought in advance. Their bags were packed. They had told their family where they were going and why. They were heading to visit friends. It was supposed to be a quick trip, a weekend away. Their mother...
7 a.m. in the morning was their flight. So, whenever I'm traveling, you always got to be there at least an hour early before your flight, due to the checkpoint, going through all of this security. And these days, you got to take off your shoes. You can't have this, and you got to have a certain amount to order be able to carry whatever luggage you have on the plane. It can't be a big, big, big suitcase. It could like a small suitcase or whatever, a small bag, a nice weekend getaway bag or whatever. And it has to be a certain amount, a certain size. So they never made it through TAA. But the last person who picked them up was supposed to have been either a Uber driver or a Lyft driver or a cab, some kind of private cab company or whatever. So those are the places I would look because they sound suspicious. And then saying that they did get dropped off at the airport, but they never made it to the airport and their tickets were still with them and they ended up on the mountain. This sounds like foul play. Let's go on.
remembered seeing them that morning before they left. They seemed calm, focused. There was no hesitation, no sign that anything was wrong. At 5:30 a.m., a rideshare was ordered from their house to the airport. They left the house on time. No missed calls, no last-minute changes. The plan was in motion. Security footage confirmed that they never made it through TSA. In fact, there's no evidence they even set foot in the terminal. The rideshare driver confirmed that he dropped them off at the entrance, but after that, they seemed to vanish. Phone records showed that both of their phones were turned off shortly after 6 a.m. They weren't answering texts. Calls went straight to voicemail. Their parents assumed they were just caught up in the rush of travel. But as the hours passed, that explanation started to unravel. The friends waiting for them in Boston never heard from them. When the plane landed and the twins weren't on it, their family's concern turned to panic. Messages were left. Calls were made. No response. Later that afternoon, the airline confirmed that the tickets had gone unused. At first, their family thought there must have been some mistake. Maybe they missed the flight and caught a later one. Maybe they changed their minds and decided not to go. The plane tickets were found the next day, still tucked into their wallets, when their bodies were discovered on Bell Mountain. Bell Mountain is 90 miles from their home in Lawrenceville. It's not a place they had ever talked about visiting. They didn't have friends there, no family connection, nothing to explain why two teenagers, with bags packed for a flight to Boston, would suddenly end up on a remote mountain deep in the Georgia wilderness. No one could explain how they got there. Their car was still parked at home. No rideshare was logged beyond the airport drop-off. No surveillance footage placed them anywhere near Bell Mountain. They were last seen alive at the airport, and less than 24 hours later, they were dead on top of a mountain they had no reason to visit. Their parents were left grasping for answers. They were excited about Boston, their father said. Why would they just disappear? That question, why, would become the center of the investigation. And with every piece of evidence that followed, the mystery only deepened. Bell Mountain isn't easy to get to. Winding roads, sharp turns, and steep inclines make the drive challenging. It's quiet, isolated, a place where hikers go for the view, not for company. At 11:05 a.m., a pair of hikers made their way up one of the narrow trails leading toward the summit. They had taken this trail before. It was familiar routine. But that day, something was different. They saw it before they heard anything. Two figures lying close together near the edge of the overlook. No movement, no sound. At first, they thought it might be hikers resting. But as they got closer, that thought quickly faded. The bodies were unnaturally still. Faces turned toward the sky. And then they saw the blood. The hikers backed away and called 911. Within 20 minutes, local deputies from the town's county sheriff's office were on scene. The area was quickly taped off. Paramedics confirmed what the deputies already suspected. Both victims were deceased. There were no signs of life, no pulse. Identification was found almost immediately. 2 wallets, 2 sets of ID. Kader Lewis, Nazir Lewis, 19 years old, from Lawrenceville, brothers. By early afternoon, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation (GBI) was called in to take over the case. The location, remote and difficult to access, made it unlikely that this was random. The manner in which the bodies were found raised even more questions. Both brothers were positioned close together, lying side by side. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence they had been tied up or restrained. The scene was quiet, undisturbed, and yet the cause of death was immediately apparent. Gunshot wounds. Both brothers had been shot. The weapon, a single handgun, was found near their bodies. It appeared undisturbed. No sign that it had been tossed or hidden. But there was no note, no explanation, nothing to suggest why 2 teenage brothers, who were supposed to be on a flight to Boston, were now lying dead on top of a mountain. The authorities worked quickly to contain the scene. Evidence markers were placed. Photographs were taken. The bodies were carefully removed from the site. Autopsies were ordered. Toxicology tests. Ballistics reports. But the immediate question remained the same. How did they get here? The trail leading to the summit is challenging, steep, uneven, and not the kind of place you'd end up by accident. No one saw them arrive. No vehicles were reported near the trailhead. There was no record of a rideshare dropping them off. No indication that they had hiked up the mountain themselves. It was as if they had appeared there without explanation. Early speculation pointed to a possible murder-suicide, but that theory didn't sit well with the family. They wouldn't hurt each other, their mother said. They wouldn't even argue. And then there was the timing. Less than 24 hours after they were supposed to board that flight. The tickets still in their wallets. No one could explain why two brothers with so much ahead of them would end up on that mountain, or why they wouldn't have fought to survive. But the most unsettling detail wasn't the location. It was the silence. No screams. No signs of struggle. No reports of gunshots from nearby residents or hikers. Bell Mountain is quiet, but sound carries across the ridges and valleys. And yet no one heard a thing. Kader and Nazir Lewis arrived on Bell Mountain somehow. They died there. But the story of how and why was only just beginning to unfold. The bodies of Kader and Nazir Lewis were transported to the GBI crime lab in Atlanta. The autopsies were ordered immediately. The results would be critical, the answers everyone was waiting for. But as the examination began, the findings only raised more questions. The medical examiner's report confirmed the obvious first. Both brothers had died from gunshot wounds. Kader had been shot in the chest, a clean entry wound, no sign of close-range firing. Nazir had been shot once in the head, an almost perfect shot, instantly fatal. But the positioning of the wounds was where things became difficult to explain. Kader's chest wound suggested he had been standing or sitting upright when he was shot. Nazir's head wound suggested he had been lying down or kneeling. The angles didn't align with the idea of a struggle, or with the theory that one brother had shot the other and then turned the gun on himself. And then there was the gun. A single 9mm handgun, registered to neither brother. No fingerprints were found on the weapon. Not Kader's. Not Nazir's. It had been wiped clean. Gunshot residue tests were performed on both brothers' hands. The results were inconclusive. Traces were present, but not enough to definitively say that either brother had fired the gun. The presence of residue could have come from handling the weapon or being shot at close range. But if neither brother had fired the gun, then who had? The toxicology reports added another layer of confusion. No drugs, no alcohol. Both brothers were completely sober at the time of death. Their blood work showed no sign of sedatives. No indication that they had been incapacitated. Whatever happened on that mountain, they were fully aware of it. The official cause of death was listed as gunshot wounds. But the manner of death? That was left undetermined. Meanwhile, investigators focused on the timeline. The last confirmed sighting of the brothers was at the airport, just after 6 a.m. on March 7th. That left an 18-hour window before their bodies were discovered on Bell Mountain. Their cell phones had remained off since 6 a.m. No outgoing calls, no text messages, no activity on their bank accounts. Security footage from the airport showed them stepping onto the curb. After that, nothing. Investigators checked traffic cameras along the route to Bell Mountain. No sign of their faces. No matching license plate from a known vehicle. The hikers who found them were questioned, their stories matched. They had no connection to the brothers. They had no reason to lie. Interviews with family and friends painted a consistent picture. Kader and Nazir were close, unusually close. They were each other's shadow. They were both athletes, top students, never in trouble with the law. No history of violence. No known enemies. There was no history of mental health issues. No evidence of suicidal thoughts. And their trip to Boston was something they had both been looking forward to. If something had gone wrong, neither had shown any sign of it. Yet, authorities continued to lean toward a murder-suicide. The weapon was found at the scene. The lack of defensive wounds suggested they hadn't been attacked. But their family refused to accept that conclusion. They wouldn't hurt each other, their mother insisted. If they were in trouble, they would have called for help. And the gun itself, how did they get it? Where did it come from? Ballistics testing traced the weapon back to a pawn shop in Atlanta, purchased 6 months earlier, by a man with no known connection to the brothers. That man was questioned. He provided an alibi. No evidence linked him to the brothers. He said the gun had been stolen from his home months earlier. There was a police report to confirm it. So how did it end up on Bell Mountain, next to the bodies of two brothers who weren't supposed to be there? The investigation stalled. Leads dried up. Without new evidence, authorities were left with a list of unanswered questions. How did they get to Bell Mountain? Who brought the gun? Who pulled the trigger? And why? With no answers, only silence, the case grew colder by the day. But Kader and Nazir's family wasn't giving up. They were convinced that someone knew more, that someone was keeping quiet. And until the truth came out, the mystery of Bell Mountain would remain open. Bell Mountain is not a place you stumble upon. It's remote, tucked away in the Blue Ridge Mountains, far from major highways and tourist spots. The narrow road leading up to it is treacherous. Sharp turns, steep drops, and little room for error. It's not the kind of place you end up by accident. Kader and Nazir Lewis had never mentioned Bell Mountain. No friends recalled them talking about it. No social media posts suggested they had ever been there before. Their parents had never taken them there as children. There was no connection, no reason for them to be on that mountain at all. And yet, on the morning of March 8th, they were found there. Investigators retraced the route from Lawrenceville to Bell Mountain. It would have been at least a 2-hour drive. The problem was, there was no evidence they made that drive. Traffic cameras along the main routes showed no sign of their faces or a car matching any known registration. Their phones were powered off. There was no GPS trail, no Uber or Lyft record, no credit card charges for gas or food along the way. So how did they get there? Authorities speculated that someone else could have driven them, but no witnesses came forward. No one reported seeing the brothers that day. No suspicious vehicles were spotted near the trailhead. It was as if they had appeared there out of thin air. And then there was the question of why they would go there at all. Kader and Nazir were not experienced hikers. Bell Mountain's trails are steep and unforgiving, not the kind of place two teenagers would choose to explore on a whim. They weren't dressed for hiking. No backpacks, no water bottles, just the clothes they left the house in, the same clothes they had planned to wear on the flight to Boston. But Bell Mountain isn't just remote. It has a history. Locals have long regarded the area with quiet unease. Strange occurrences, missing hikers, unexplained accidents, sightings of shadowy figures near the summit. Some chalk it up to the terrain, loose rocks, sudden weather changes. Others believe there's more to it, that Bell Mountain holds something unexplainable. In the months leading up to Kader and Nazir's deaths, there had been reports of unusual activity near the summit. Strange noises at night, flashlights seen moving along the ridge line after dark. A few hikers reported hearing whispers, faint voices carried on the wind, but no one could ever identify the source. Authorities downplayed these reports, but after the brothers were found, the stories resurfaced. An older couple hiking the trail 3 days before the brothers were discovered had reported seeing a dark-colored SUV parked near the trailhead. The SUV was running lights off. They said they saw two figures standing near the vehicle, but it was too dark to see any faces. By the time they circled back down the trail, the SUV was gone. That report was filed with the sheriff's department, but it was never followed up. After the brothers' deaths, investigators went back to the report. The problem was, no security footage confirmed the presence of an SUV at the time it was reported, and the couple couldn't identify the figures they saw. Another hiker claimed to have seen two young men on the trail late in the afternoon on March 7th, close to the time authorities believe the brothers died. He said they seemed quiet, calm. They weren't talking to each other, just walking side by side toward the summit. They didn't look lost, he said. They looked like they knew where they were going. But that sighting raised even more questions. If they knew where they were going, why hadn't they mentioned it to anyone? And why would they have traveled nearly 2 hours into the mountains on the same day they were supposed to be in Boston? Then there was the gun. Authorities...
Wow. The more you listen to this, the more and more you know somebody knows something. How did they just end up on this Bell Mountain in Georgia? They never been there before, never had no conversation. Nobody ever heard them even talk about this place before. They have no, knowledge. No, the family don't know any knowledge of them. I mean, I understand when kids, they don't, parents, sometimes you don't know what your kids are doing when they out of your sight. And the people they associate with, a lot of times kids don't tell their parents about a lot of sometimes certain type of friends they might have or certain type of things they might be involved in. Um, but this here, I would be looking more at the person who the gun belongs to and s- interview some of the people that that person might know. And then on top of that, when his gun went missing, around what time, do you remember who might have been at your house? So that stolen gun thing don't sit right with me. And then there's no fingerprints on the gun, and the gun was wiped clean. What else can I say here? The gun was wiped clean, and both of them, the gunshot wounds, one to the chest, one to the head, one in the sitting position, one in the kneeling position, both on the and laying like next side to side next to each other. And then they're gonna come back and say it was suicide. What kind of investigation is that? That don't sound right. Like they don't really want to care. They just want to close the case and just make it a suicide thing instead of investigating who this person or people may be that has done something so heinous, something so monstrous, something so somebody that going around kidnapping and murdering people up on this mountain. Um, I don't think they should close down the crime scene there. The person that did it or the people that did it, they know that area very well, and they know how to camouflage themselves so they won't be seen. And people talking about they hear stories about whispers and then some strange things that go up on the mountain. I remember the story in North Carolina. It's called the Blair Witch Project. It was to be a strange kind of spirit. And let me tell you something, there are some people that can be some spirits living in the wilderness. You don't know these places. That's why people be going on these camping trips, going out there in them woods. I don't play with that. Mm-mm. But there was a story about the Blair Witch monster, or whatever, the Blair Witch whatever project or whatever in North Carolina, where people were spooked. It's a spooky story, and mysteriously how people ended up dead. You could do your research on the Blair Witch Mountain um, in North Carolina, in these mountain areas where there's a lot of trees, wood, wilderness. And that's why I told my husband and everybody, I can't live in nobody's wilderness, even though I know it's killings everywhere. I mean, no matter where you live, the suburbs, or you live in the rural parts of the suburbs, or you live in the city, you never know. You don't know who's watching you, um, following you. That's why I go days hiding. I take different routes every day. When I go to work in the morning, I leave at different times, different days. You know what I'm saying? I always like try to take a different route because you never know who's watching you. That's why you have to know how to pray and ask God for protection over your life, no matter where you go, in your home, outside of your home, when you at work. You never know who's watching you. Well, anyway, y'all, I gotta end this video, and I will try to follow up with anything else that comes up about these boys. I just wanted to just share this information out there. I just want to keep this thing going as far as like the light on things about this. If anything else develops about what happened to Quadir and Nizer, the twins, the Lewis twins. I just want to, I'm trying to get away from all the stuff with the Carmelo and Lewis. I mean, the Carmelo thing, all that stuff. It makes certain things come out of you, and you just trying to just stay calm. But I do have a feeling for Carmelo and Hunter, the twin. I believe that God is going to use Hunter for his glory. Something just touched me and say something ain't right. This boy wants to really, this young man wants to tell really what happened. And even if it has to take the fact of letting the public know that his brother was the one who was the aggressor And his brother, before he know it, his brother had a knife in his chest. And he might have been trying to tell his brother to stop. And when there's twins, like these twins here, they said they were so close together they barely even argue with each other. They were just really like so like that type of way. And then when I think about the twins, Austin and Hunter, I think reading the Bible and everything and hearing the stories about twins like Esau and Jacob, and Esau was the older twin, Jacob was the younger twin, and they both were hairy. I mean, one was hairy and the other one wasn't. They wasn't identical twins. They were fraternal twins, but still in all, they were twin brothers. The mother was favored over one brother, and the father was favored over the other. One was the one who liked it to be out in the wilderness and doing wild things, more thuggish or whatever. And the other one was more like the business minded one, the one that stayed and handled the family business, stayed close to the mother, learning the family business and everything. And the one tricked the other one out of the food and out of his birthright. I'm sorry. The other one, he wanted to, because Jacob was the younger twin, like I said, and Esau was the older twin. And Esau was the kind that was like, I ain't about this family business stuff. He just wanted to be out there doing his thing, wilding out, wherever. Until it came down to the point where Esau ended up selling his birthright to his brother when he became broke, no money, no this, and he was like really down and low. And he was like, "Look, man," he wanted some venison soup or some Finnish, and he didn't say Finnish soup at the time, but he wanted something to eat. When they say eat in the Bible, you got to go into your spiritual lens. It's not actually food, food, food. I think it was all about money. I think it was all about something that he needed from him at the time, and he was really desperate. So he was willing to sell off his birthright for his brother just so he can help him out at that moment. And he had to give up some collateral, okay? And then when he gave up his birthright and everything, of course, the mother, when the father died, and coming to his death, Joseph, he made sure that she tricked the husband, Rebecca, and put him, was it Isaac? Esau and Jacob. They was no, Isaac was their father. I'm sorry, I don't know. Joseph came later. Joseph Joseph came later, but they father Isaac or whatever. And they was like, oh my God. The mother, Rebecca, of course, was their mother, and she liked, of course, Jacob more. So she helped the other twin to trick the father. She put all this hairy stuff on him and made him, feel like his brother felt. And when the father couldn't really see very well, he thought, but he says, you sound more like Jacob. You don't sound like Esau. And he says, Father, it's me, whatever, whatever. You read the book, it's in the story of Genesis from the beginning of time, even with the brothers. There's always one good one bad one. And in this case, what I say about these two twins, they both were in one set mind, twins. But if you could look at those twins, Hunter and the other one, Austin, you could tell that Austin probably was the more aggressive one with a more meaner demeanor. Okay, he had a more, and then the mother even said it that he was always the one to be able to take like put himself first. And if you listen to the interview, so when I'm looking at Hunter, Hunter is really struggling to really try to bring the truth out, and it's killing him inside. He's living with it, like what could I could have done to avoid all of this, that I could have saved my brother and he could have still been here with me. Because I don't think Hunter meant any harm. He was just probably just going along with it. That's his brother. And I think right now Hunter gonna feel a certain type of way about his parents in a way, and especially being that they were supposed to be raised in some sort of kind of like Christian upbringing, and it don't seem too Christian if your brother's over there harassing somebody and telling somebody they're not supposed to be in a certain place. But people are trying to now make it seem like, you know, um, the young man Carmelo was going through people things and he saw him and he confronted him, saw him trying to steal something or whatever like that, which I don't think is true. They just going to try to throw anything in there to try to make it sound like this guy was a real criminal, like really trying to do whatever. But I truly believe that Hunter is going to blow this case open. He's going to come out and say he's just going to have an outburst in that courtroom. He's just going to flip out. It's and a lot of other things that might have happened too that he tried to avoid his brother from doing, but he went along with it because that's his brother, and it was just them two together, doing whatever. So we'll see. But as far as these two twins, Quadir and Nizer, two beautiful twins, these young boys were so adorable. They look just so adorable. And my heart goes out to this family that they're going to find some peace and that somebody will know something to close this case. How did their son ended up murdered on Bell Mountain? And with that being said, I'm going to say you all have a blessed afternoon. And if God's willing, anything else come up, I'll be back with you soon. So take care and be good to one another.